A very good evening to you, or good morning to you, or good afternoon to you. You're welcome along to another in our Alienated Children First series on parental alienation. And the guest this evening is none other than Erin Pizzey, who you will of course know as the lady who started the world's very, very first women's shelter. Now, today we have the Me Too movement, we have feminism well and truly established, and such things are taken more or less for granted. But back in the day, there were big issues around such things, which Erin is going to tell us all about. We're just having some technical difficulties getting through to Erin right now. So it being Bubbles of Love Day today, which is the International Day for Parental Alienation Awareness, and where parents who are alienated from their children can send messages to those children by way of our website. They can email them from alienated.ie. I think media@alienated.ie is the Bubbles of Love Day link, and they can put the links up there, which hopefully their kids will get to see. I see Erin's picture has appeared there. Can you hear me, Erin? Okay, you need to unmute yourself, Erin. There's a button in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen with a little microphone that's red with a line. That sounds better. Nearly.
Sorry about that.
There we go. There we go. So where to start then? I was going to say we would show you a video that we've prepared for Bubbles of Love Day today, whilst we were waiting for Erin's connection to come through. But it having now come through, there will be no need to do that, and we will save it for the end of our presentation today. So I guess media@alienated.ie, as I say, is the address if you want to send a message to your kids that you don't get to see enough of. But in the interim, let me introduce Erin Pizzey as the lady who, as I said already, started out by opening the very, very first women's shelter in the world. We live now in a time where such things as women's rights are taken for granted by most, and where our own Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee, is working hard to fight against parental alienation. As we've previously mentioned, Minister McEntee commissioned a report last year into parental alienation, the results of which came back in November, and we all eagerly await the findings of that report, which will hopefully help alienated parents, fathers and mothers who don't get to see their children for no good reason other than the spite of the other parent, and put them in some kind of a condition whereby there's something they can do about it through the courts. But in the interim, may I please welcome to the program Erin Pizzey. How are you, Erin?
I'm fine, thank you.
You got rid of those gremlins in your computer in the end.
Oh, finally, yes. It's very, very old. It's like me.
Well, I hope it's working as well.
It's very dodgy.
Not like you, though.
No.
Erin, I suppose you're most famed for your establishment of, as I mentioned now, a couple of times, the first women's shelter. What were the circumstances in which you found yourself in a position where you wanted to do that? And
I didn't want to. It was a complete accident. If I'd known what was coming, I'd have run away. I'm not virtuous. No, what happened is that I'd fallen out with the women's movement because they kept trying to tell me that a family was a dangerous place for mothers and children. And I realized that once it became anti-fathers and men, then there was no place for me. So I left and I started what I believed in, which is a small community center in Chiswick, which is, I lived on the borders. And there's a tiny derelict house, and myself and a group of other women got together And it was somewhere where women could meet with their children, but not only just for the children's sake, but also we had provision where we could actually work in our community, because there's nothing on offer for women. Or when you were home with children, that's what you did, because nobody wanted you with your children. I mean, the best you could do in those days was to go to 1 o'clock clubs and sit with other women. But I felt that we should be able to use all our talents. So that's what happened. And we did it all ourselves. And
just let me take you back though. You were motivated to set this up because you feel that women should be able to use all of their talents and weren't able to.
No, they couldn't, because either you could go out to work and put your kids in a nursery or a childminder. If you're lucky, you've got grandmas, but there's nothing else on offer. And I felt that I wanted to stay with my children. I want to be part of their growing up. So why couldn't I be allowed to use both of my qualities? One, which is an administrator, and the other was to be a mother to my kids. And it wasn't possible in those days. So
Okay.
the idea was that the group, and with our children, we had a play group, and we had an office with a typewriter and a telephone. And between the group, we had many, many different abilities. For instance, one of the girls, women, was a plumber. So she did the plumbing in the house, which needed it. And the rest of us learned to paint and decorate and do everything we needed to do. No, I mean, this is, and out of that, where we met and started to work in our own communities. The women who were on their own, behind us was Belmont Terrace, and that's where they dumped all the problem families, particularly women whose husbands were in jail. Now, this often meant that a woman's husband was perhaps in jail on the Isle of Wight. So even if she could get a pass to see him, she couldn't, because she wouldn't be able to afford to stay overnight, because you can't do that trip without staying overnight. So we took on all those problems, and then a lot of women started coming in who wouldn't go to social services. They were frightened of them. And we started helping them with all the various different things they needed. And out of that, the first woman came, Kathy, and she took off her jersey, and Wally had beaten her with a chair leg. She was blue from what he hit her carefully, where no one could see the bruises, but when she took off the top off, it was just black and blue. And so that was the first case. And then thereafter, word got out. And before long, we were absolutely crammed into this tiny little 4-roomed house with an outside lavatory, and it had a kitchen, a galley kitchen. And then along came, thank God, because I was, imagine, the Hounslow Council had taken out warrants for my arrest. They were not, they'd taken out warrants for my arrest for overcrowding.
Wow.
Nobody wanted to deal with this subject. The first thing I did when I realized these women were pouring in was to go and look for any research material on domestic violence. There was absolutely nothing. There was a bit in the academic world about child abuse, but nothing about what happened behind front doors. And very quickly, I realized of the first 100 women that came in, 62 were as violent or more violent than the men they left. But having seen that, my argument was these are the mothers we most need to look after, to help them, because the women coming in who were innocent victims of their partner's violence certainly needed help, needed refuge, and needed rehousing. But women who themselves had come from long-term violence in their families and gone on to marry into violent relationships, they needed therapeutic intervention, because without it, the problem would be is they'd probably move on to yet another violent man.
But you weren't qualified in any way to offer any.
Oh, yes, I was. There's
Oh.
no better qualification than lived experience. And I lived it with my parents.
That. Oh.
And my father was in the Foreign Office. So, and my mother, she was a beautiful, ice cold, narcissistic exhibitionist. And they fought all over the world. They had big houses, they had servants, they had chauffeurs. So I said from the beginning, because they kept saying, oh, well, it's the sort of people that keep coal in their bath, you know, the uneducated. I said, no, it's not. It goes right the way through our society. It's a learned pattern of childhood. If your child is born into a war, not of its making,
yeah,
the child has really only two strategies. Oops. Sorry, only two.
That's the council looking for you again.
Yeah, I know. And so, as far as I was concerned, the next step had to be that we had more accommodation. And we got that. And Neville Vincent from Bovis, he owned Bovis in those days. He came down and he bought us a much, much bigger house. And from there, we became the largest squatting agency in England. We took all sorts of empty houses that had just been done out and been left unused by various councils. The biggest was the Palm Court Hotel in Richmond. It had 47 private suites. It was perfect. So we were a very, very big organization and a threat.
To whom?
Social workers, everybody. Because we said from the beginning, the social workers have been aware of this problem. Every family agency in England and in the Western world had known about this domestic violence, but nobody had ever tried to do anything about it. And that to me.
So typically what happened then before you got things rolling? A woman was in a violent relationship, being beaten. Where did she go, or what did she?
Well, the social workers would say, "We can't help you, but we will take your children and put them in care. You find your own accommodation, and eventually you can get them back." Well, no, she couldn't, because she could never make enough money to rent a place of her own. Because, and the other thing, so the Social Security would say, she'd say, "But I've got no money. Can I go to Social Security?" And they'd say, "No, you can't. You've got a perfectly good partner who wants you back." So they could go, they're trapped.
It's a very sad situation, isn't it? And what year are we talking about?
1971.
1971, as recent as that.
50 years ago, yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. So by accident, you ended up establishing a refuge for women.
Yes.
You had by then decided that there was a phobia within the women's movement towards men, which colored your picture of what they were doing. And you had identified, as a result of your own personal experience, that the people who most needed the attention within your organization were not those who came in black and blue because they were innocent victims, but those who came in black and blue because they fought back.
Yes, that's exactly right. And also, but either way, the children were very disturbed.
And how could you possibly, I mean, as in any kind of domestic violence situation, physical, emotional, whatever, I mean, obviously the kids are the ones who always are the ultimate victims, and they carry it for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely.
So
generational.
Multi-generational, indeed it is. But what could you possibly do in your situation in the 1970s to help those kids?
The most important thing for me is the first bit of money I was given, I employed a male playgroup leader. And
male playgroup leader.
So important for the children to know good, gentle men, and for the women.
But the children were in there with the mums as well.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, I mean, that was the most important part of it. Everything was geared towards the children had no choice in the matter. They're brought into a war. And they develop certain strategies, what I call for survival. Some become violent and try and defend what's going on. Particularly often it's the child trying to defend the mother from the father, even if both are fighting. And the terrible damage it does to the child. And it's proven now that where there's violence, when a woman is pregnant, the chemicals of fear and rage will affect the child just as much as yeah. And we don't look at all this. Even now, 50 years later, people are surprised when I talk about generational family violence. It's not a concept yet. There are a few academics who do understand it.
I mean, it's fairly well accepted, I think, that the perpetrators of child abuse tend to have been abused themselves as a general rule, is it not?
Not really.
Really? Is it the case?
Yes, absolutely. Unless what can happen, which is the work that I did with the children and my staff, was to help the child transcend its family violence.
So how can a child possibly do such a thing?
All right. First and foremost, if you're a child born into a very violent family and you're beaten, one of the first things you do is you learn not to show emotions. You don't cry. Because if you do, you usually enrage the violent partner even more. So what tends to happen, children born into those families go from pain and frustration straight to rage like the parents. What you have to do is to get the child to create trust with the adults in the refuge, such trust that the child, when the child is in a rage, they can learn to express sorrow and pain. And the same for the mothers. You know, if you've come from a warring family, you don't learn. And when a child's about 2 or 3 and they go through that tantrum stage, loving parents show the child how to control their aggression. But if the parents are at war with each other, the child doesn't learn that any more than the parents did. And we've got to stop labeling children. You know, you go to school, maybe they're in a primary school and they're fighting. And the teacher said, well, it's a really bad child. They don't think, where did that child learn to behave like this? Children aren't born violent. They're made.
And today then, 50 years later, as you said, so a lot of this still isn't being addressed. We do have a lot of women's shelters, though, all over the world now.
No, but the problem with the women's shelters is they're feminized. So
what do you mean by feminized?
Feminized, it's virtually all refuges are now owned and run by gender feminists.
What do you mean gender feminists?
They believe that all women are innocent victims of male violence.
And what about male victims of domestic violence? Where do they come?
No such thing.
There's no such thing.
No, and if a woman does attack a man, it's in self-defense.
And what about where a woman takes a man's children and won't let him see them and tells them that he's...
According to the feminist movement, she has to do that because he's dangerous.
Or what if he's not dangerous at all?
They don't accept that.
Okay, so there's a bit of...
one of the most difficult businesses in parental alienation is getting the feminist movement to accept that a man can want to see his children because he loves his children, not because he wants to get back at his wife, because that's their argument. Oh no, the only reason he wants to see his children is because he wants to be able to persecute her.
And how would he persecute her by seeing his children? Sure, presumably he's taking the children off her hands for a while and giving her a break. And
no, he's as soon as he can get his hands on the children, he can then start demonizing and grooming them.
Why would he do that?
Because he believes that he's totally innocent and she has no right not to let him see the children.
Surely, you know, it's a fairly intrinsic part of human nature to realize that, you know, you don't shoot the messenger. And if the child is you know, if you don't like the mother, you don't say that in front of the child, surely.
Yes, you do. That's why we have parental alienation.
Oh,
don't we? It's epidemic, but because in these cases, one or other adult can't make proper relationships because they've never been taught.
So let me come back to that one in a second. Firstly, may I have your definition, for want of a less formal word, of what parental alienation is?
I call it soul murder. Parental alienation is, to a child, the worst possible part of it. It shreds a child's loyalty. So a young, small child suddenly find themselves pitched into what is an adult battle, emotional battle, and has to make choices. Either way, the child can't win. Because unless the child learns to lie, which they often do very early. I watched a couple, a warring couple, with a baby, with a toddler. He was about 3. And they were sitting in 2 chairs with a toddler between them. And they were beginning to pick at each other and start to argue. And the child was already in a position of understanding what was going on, because he was running to his mother and putting his knee on her, his head on her knee. She was saying, "Oh, see, he loves me best." Then he'd run back to his dad and put his head on his dad's knee. "Oh, no, he doesn't. He loves me best." And the child was in the middle.
I mean, our experience of parental alienation is that it happens to both sexes, and that, you know, we have many women who we try to help whose husbands or ex-husbands parentally alienate them.
Yeah.
But some
good, normal, loving fathers and mothers don't do it.
So that was going to be my next question. You know, one of the psychologists we spoke to said, well, about 85% of the parental alienation cases that he, being Richard Hogan, deals with are men who are alienated by women. It doesn't seem to happen as much the other way around. And I've also, to a number of psychologists, posed the question, surely if you might dislike your spouse intensely or your former spouse, but surely you know that to say that in front of the child or to weaponize the child in any way is first and foremost.
That's exactly what they are. No, they're quite consciously weaponizing the child. They themselves are incapable of putting their children's needs first. They put their own need to venge themselves on their partner.
Okay, but that's abnormal. I mean, that's abnormal.
No, that's all I keep saying to you. Nice, normal, loving parents don't behave that way. But unfortunately, with generational family violence and dysfunction, a section of the community do behave that way.
So is it therefore that the case, given that we accept the parental alienation is something abnormal, that the people who do it are suffering from some kind of personality disorder?
If you come from a violence-prone family where all you've known is violence and dysfunction, that's what you see as normal. That's how you behave. We need to educate far earlier on. We shouldn't be, we're talking about when it's too late, it's all broken down. We should educate about relationships in schools to senior children, because we talk to them about sex. We don't talk to them about relationships.
Yeah, it was always, you know, the thing that we all have to work on most is how to live and find a spouse and bring up children and all that kind of thing. And it's the one thing that nobody ever teaches you how to do.
I know. And so the warning signs, I was talking to a whole group of young people, and I was saying to them, you know, particularly the boys, well, and girls, say, you know, well, your girlfriend, for instance, she's so jealous. You think that's wonderful. You think that's because she loves you so much, she can't bear you to look at anybody else. I said, but no, that's a real danger signal. Because morbid jealousy comes into domestic violence.
And domestic violence, of course, doesn't necessarily have to involve physical violence, because it can be equally psychological. And
enough, you're better off if you've got a bruise. You can at least say, this is what happened to me. It's the words that don't go away. And I've seen, I call it again, it's part of soul murder. I've seen men and women reduced to husks by what I call the mask of sanity, because the partner is charismatic, everybody thinks they're wonderful, and underneath it all, and when the mask's off, they're just dangerous human beings.
And without exception, they are people who must have been abused themselves to become these dangerous human beings?
Yes, or they're born with a personality disorder. The one that creates the most havoc in relationships are narcissistic exhibitionists, and they're made. If you're born to a mother who is completely negligent and unable to mother or nurture, the chances are the child will turn in on itself. And thereafter, the whole world becomes solipsistic for the child. And he doesn't relate to anything outside. And that's how you create a narcissist. They're not born, they're made.
Okay, so it's not, is it a personality
disorder? Yeah, it's one of the most serious, it is, I think, the most serious of all. They make terrible parents.
Is there a difference between somebody suffering that particular kind of personality disorder and a sociopath?
It can include being a sociopath. Or a
sociopath is someone who cannot empathize with other people, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, it's a fascinating subject. So let's say I'm, just because I happen to be male, a dad who is alienated, and I have kids who I love dearly. My ex won't let me see them, get to see them once a month by virtue of some draconian court order, and have no access to them. The kids turn up and they say, "We hate you, Dad," and Dad says, "Why?" And they say, "We don't know, we just do."
Well, the dad has to basically always say, whatever the child's doing, it's just reiterate, "I love you, I love you, I want you in my life." It's a hard road, that one. And the other thing is that until we get, the family courts aren't fit for purpose. I've been saying this for years, because the situation is the judge can't really do anything to a woman when she says she won't let the man see the children. The only final recourse the judge has is to switch residency, give the father residency, but that hardly ever happens. The problem is that he's not going to put the mother in jail. If the father behaved that way, his feet wouldn't touch the ground. But no judge wants to jail a woman.
But isn't that sexism?
Yeah, it is. Well, our whole society for the last 50 years has been anti-fathers and men. Women and children come first, women and girls, actually. Boys over the age of 12 can't go into refuges.
So is that well, as far as I know, certainly in Ireland, there aren't any refuges for men to go to anyway. But
there aren't any here either. There aren't anywhere. There's one that I visited in, I think it was Aalborg, which I think is in Denmark. And they could take 10 families, males with children. But that's the only one I know of.
Because it seems to me that we lived in a world for centuries whereby, you know, the male was the leader of the pack and the woman was subjugated to a large extent by a male-dominated and orchestrated society, to which end you had, in the time that you were discussing there, the 1970s, women who in Ireland were growing up with mothers telling them, you know, I'm not allowed to own my own property in my own name. It has to be in my husband's name. And
because women in those days didn't have any property. They had property, they could.
Okay, but they just practically didn't get it in the first place. But of course, a generation before that, women weren't allowed to vote just because they were women. Which,
and actually, neither with men. Again, if a man had property, he voted. If he didn't, at the same time as women were getting the vote, there were the men dying in the fields of Somme and Flanders in the war. They didn't have a vote.
Wow.
You have to remember all this.
Yeah, well, you have the benefit of years as well as wisdom.
Yeah, because I had to. The truth wasn't being told. It isn't today. It's completely false to say that all women are innocent victims of male violence. It completely. Why would you say in a violent home that only the boys are infected? No, both children.
Just to finish the point that I was going to make, though, and you're touching on the answer there a bit anyway by discussing what I suppose you'd call stereotypical views. But my first, just to try and get my head around it, starting point would need to be, why are there such stereotypical views? And it seems to me that the world was very unfairly in favor of masculinity, and the power was with masculinity, and women were subjugated. And At the middle of the 1850s, thereabouts, things started to change. We had the suffragettes, etc. Things changed gradually over the 20th century to the point where, certainly in academic circles, we now have equal rights of men and women. But the women that are now enjoying this newfound equilibrium, which again, I'm saying in academic circles, grew up with parents mothers who I guess were saying, well, the world is unfair, men are very mean to us. And perhaps that might explain why there is a swinging of the pendulum too far from the male side through the middle where it belongs. It's got some momentum and kicked a bit further on. Is that a possible explanation, would you say?
No, I don't think so, because it comes back to the reality. In normal families where fathers were dominant in the external world, women actually were just as powerful in the home, in their world. Yeah. And yes, women,
and often controlled the purse strings, as I recall.
Of course, always. Men used to. The working men would come in and put their weekly wage packet on the table, and she'd give him back his pocket money. No, I mean, it wasn't. It is in good, loving, warm relationships. There isn't a power struggle. But what we're talking about is where there's violence and dysfunction. And we have to remember that.
So what's the solution?
Educate, educate, educate. Teach human relationships early, as soon as young people are getting old enough to learn about relationships. And to recognize that to lift a hand or to verbally abuse somebody, recognize the damage it does.
Well, we're seeing it now on social media where kids are driving each other to suicide.
Yes. And that'll be the same kids doing the driving that have been abused at home. Because the problem with abuse, as you said, there is no empathy. No ability to put yourself into somebody else's shoes and feel what they're feeling. And these people are dangerous.
So as an alienated parent, then, just picking what I can from what you've said and just to make sure that I have it right, the person who is orchestrating the alienation is probably a narcissist and most likely suffering from a personality disorder of some sort, probably as a result of something that happened in their own childhood.
Yes.
And they won't be able to be empathized with, so there's no point, obviously, therefore, trying to reason with them, I suppose. When you do see your kids, you should just keep telling them they love them regardless of what kind of...
We also have to get judges to understand that they must make, even if it means putting a mother in jail, they must firmly insist that the child has access to both parents. I would like to see 50-50 access given to both parents from when the child's born.
It should certainly be the starting point for family law cases, shouldn't it? And in fact, there was an excellent documentary about 12 years ago, I think, which Sir Bob Geldof produced.
Yeah, I remember, I saw it.
One of the things that he rose in that as a point you've just tipped on, which was he's saying the problem is, you know, the court orders are mandatory for men and they're optional for women. And if a woman totally ignores the court order, the judge will just say, well, what can I do? I can't put the mother of the child in jail.
Oh, yes, you can.
To which Geldof says exactly that. Why not? Why can't you? You wouldn't have any hesitation putting the father in jail. So why could you not put the mother in jail, even as a token for 10 minutes to have a cup of coffee, so that she tells the neighbors and her friends, oh my God, they actually put me in jail. I was only there for 5 minutes, but they still did it. Can you believe it? Might that affect the number of women who don't take court orders seriously?
Yes, it would, because it's a consequence.
Sorry, I was slightly putting the words in your mouth.
No.
I apologize.
No, you're not putting up, because I've always advocated this. She goes to jail just as much as he would. And she stays in jail until she agrees that she will allow the father of the children access, except in both cases, if there's domestic violence, proven domestic violence with either parent, then that has to be negotiated. And possibly what we had to do where we had women in the refuge who were known to be violent,
yeah,
and we were working with them, we would take the children ourselves and let them spend time with their dads.
The people that we've spoken to, Erin, would argue that it's not parental alienation if it's warranted, deserved, or needed. It's a
difficult one, because you see, if this is a lesson I learned very early on, even if a man is violent or a woman is violent, it doesn't mean the children don't love them. And I've always said from the beginning in the refuge, my refuge work, the danger is if you separate a child from, let's say, the father, it doesn't take long before the child begins to fantasize about a good relationship with the dad. It's better and safer for the child to be protected by someone and to see the dad regularly, or the mother, until they're old enough to negotiate the relationship themselves.
There are cases, sadly, Erin, where the parental alienation is so systemic from such an early age that the child never ever wants to see their mother or father.
Absolutely, absolutely. I do understand that, absolutely. I used to pray. Fortunately, my parents went Foreign Office, and he went abroad a lot with my mother. And I used to pray that they stayed abroad, because having to live with them was a nightmare.
God. Very tough.
So, well, it's necessary for me to know that, because that's how I learn. And as I keep saying, this learned experience, lived experience, you can really understand how kids feel. And yet, even the member sitting on the edge of the refuge, the boy was 8, and with tears rolling down his face. And I sat down and said, I suddenly thought, I said, are you missing your dad? He said, yeah. Because your parents are not all that all the time, are they?
I guess not. I guess not. What about something that's come to light recently to us here in Ireland is the fact that the courts appear to have a cutoff point at about the age of 12 or 13, whereby they decide that what happens beyond then is not their responsibility, because children are old enough to make their own mind up, and they will pretty much go with whatever parent they feel comfortable and safe with. To which our parentally alienated parents would argue, well, they've been indoctrinated to believe there's only one parent that they're going to be safe with, and therefore, the kid's going to have no access to me as their loving mom or me as their loving dad, and that's not good for the kids. What is it about the age of 13 that makes them think that kids are okay, and is it true?
No, it's not true, because a child of 13 is still a child. They're not really emotionally capable of making real decisions till they're a lot older. I would say 18. And then, an awful lot of the time, people forget that in these dysfunctional relationships, the child very quickly becomes the parent to the alienator, and that's so difficult. No, I think that the courts are absolutely wrong to even say that, and I think that the most secure way of doing it is making sure that the child has an adult with them
when they make the decision.
Yeah,
an independent adult.
And I think the child needs what a child actually needs is counselling. To find out, are you seeing your dad because you feel guilty? You feel responsible for him? I've just been through this yesterday. So you can't be responsible for your dad. He's your parent. So when you make your decision, you should be able to make it as a real decision, not because you feel you ought to look after him.
You have an incredible insight into this entire area. I mean, I've spoken to professors from all over the world, and I've not come across someone with such an intrinsic understanding of it all. And perhaps
Well, I think also part of it, see, I was running, it's my work anyway, I'm 83, I'm still doing it. It's part of the Refuge experience where I lived with families and children, and I saw all the fathers who wanted to see me. So very few people have that experience.
If there are parents that want to learn from your experience, Erin, do you have documents on a website or papers they can read to help them?
So I wrote a book called Prone to Violence.
Prone to Violence.
Prone to Violence. You get it secondhand on Amazon. And it's a book about the therapeutic approach I took to people who were damaged in childhood. You know, it's strange, this thing, because if you had cancer in childhood and you grew up and you still had cancer, everybody would be sympathetic. But if you're an abused child and you grow up to abuse, society just abuses you further. And then we all know that most people in jail are all victims of domestic violence in childhood, virtually all of them, but we do nothing about it.
That's a whole other conversation, and particularly where you have the privatization of prisons and people being motivated to ensure they are populated with clients as a result in America and that. But
yeah,
just to try and stick with the parental alienation, I think we've produced a video which I wouldn't mind if you take a look at for us, please, Erin. This is going to be the world premiere on Bubbles of Love Day, and it's a couple of our parents and people that help us out, just talking about what they have come across as means to deal with parental alienation, and you might give us your thoughts on that afterwards. Noel, are we able to roll it there, Colette, as Gay would have said?
Coping positively with parental alienation to mark Bubbles of Love, Parental Alienation Awareness Day. Coping positively with parental alienation by Aoife Griffin, who can be contacted at aoifegriffin.ie, or for more information, contact info@alienated.ie. This video was specially produced by Alienated Children First with the fantastic help of healer Aoife Griffin, and our words are being spoken by Jan, ACF chairperson. It was created to help you cope with the parental alienation trauma that you experience. We hope it helps you a bit. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and constantly reliving the pain of parental alienation is like bleeding to death by 1,000 paper cuts. The sooner you release the emotion attached to the trauma or event, then you can begin to heal. This isn't something that can be done in an instant, but can be done with the right help, support, and treatment. There is no one size fits all, but a few ideas to try for anyone who wants a deeper personal one-on-one support. There are a group of us that are giving our time to alienated parents to help and support you. We all have different approaches, needs and experience, so there will be someone to suit the majority of parents. There are things that are out of your control that consume your every waking moment. So focus on what is in your control and look at those areas that need to change. Focus on making yourself the strongest, healthiest parent you can be, so that you are healed and whole when your child returns to you. Because they will need you at your best. Because they will need all your love and support to help them rebuild their confidence and release the trauma that they have been living through. Make time for something you love every day. This can be anything you choose that makes you feel good. Your healing is your priority above everything else right now. Your body needs to function as it houses your brain, and in order to be strong for court and for your child, you have to have a fully functioning body and mind. Releasing the tension that you're holding is one of the best things you can do. Humans are the only mammals that hold on to their stress in their bodies. If you watch any nature show where one animal is chased by another, once the danger has passed, they shake and stretch to release the tension. Then they go back to what they were doing before the danger occurred. You need to find something that's right for you. For some people, it's walking, running, swimming, the gym, sex, yoga, quantum flow, boxing, even house cleaning. Any form of exercise will do. Move your body, release the tension, and increase the feel-good hormones and endorphins. Holding on to the pain doesn't serve anyone, least of all your child. Breathing. So many of us, we shallow breathe, only using 20% of our lung capacity. But focusing on breathing technique is a simple way to calm your parasympathetic nervous system. When stressed or anxious, you live mostly in fight, flight, or freeze mode. It's a survival mechanism that goes back to the caveman era from which we evolved. Survival was life or death. A controlled breathing technique calms your nervous system, thus ensuring your body reacts positively. Box breathing technique. Box breath. Inhale and exhale for the same duration. So inhale deeply for the count of 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold for 4. Do that 4 times. If the count of 4 is too long, start with the count of 2 or 3 and then build it up to a level you feel comfortable. Practice this when you feel calm, like in the car or in the shower, so that it becomes natural, so that in moments of anxiety, it can become second nature. Use an affirmation as you're inhaling and exhaling without the holding in between, like I feel calm, or repeat your kid's name to focus for whom you want to be calm and healthy. Buddha belly is breathing into your stomach. Just place your hands on your stomach, feeling it rise as you inhale to the count of 4 and exhale to the count of 4. Tidy house, tidy mindset. Your environment is your home, somewhere safe, cozy, that is inviting for your child to visit. If you no longer care about housework and live in clutter with dirty dishes, how is that a place to feel good in, or a place that your child would want to be, or too slit to inspect? According to Feng Shui, your home is a mirror of your inner world. So if you live in a cluttered, overwhelming space, that's a reflection of how you feel inside. If you want to feel calmer and take control of your situation, start with taking control of your home. Laughter. Laughter is the highest vibration of energy. When you see a dark hole, it can feel impossible to find something fun or to see good. However, force yourself. Laughter boosts your immune system. Talk to a friend that always lifts your mood. Watch a comedy movie, a TV show, or a stand-up. Find something, anything that lifts your mood. Laughter boosts your immune system. 1 minute of anger weakens your immune system for 5 to 6 hours. 1 minute of laughter boosts your immune system for 24 hours. Nourish yourself. Part of looking after yourself is eating healthily. Living on takeaways or junk processed food is really bad for your overall health and well-being. Learn how to cook a few simple, easy, healthy meals and notice the difference it makes in your mental and physical health. You are worthy of nourishment. You're worth the time it takes to cook a healthy meal just for you. If you are living alone, it's not an excuse. Gratitude. This may be harder for some than others, but there's always something, no matter how small. If you journal 3 things that you feel grateful for in the morning, and later 3 things that you feel grateful in the evening, and noting something positive that has happened during the day. Meditation. This is not for everyone, and there's a long list of different ways to meditate. There's no right or wrong way. Everyone has their own spiritual beliefs. So find what fits in with what is right for you. But 10 minutes a day just to sit and connect with yourself and your feelings can make a world of difference to your mindset. For some people it's prayer or mindfulness, such as walking or swimming. Others find peace with meditation, such as musical, visualization or guided meditations. There is a lot of free resources, or if you want a more personal one, please feel free to contact Aoife and she will create one for you. Being kind to yourself. Constantly punishing yourself and ruminating about what ifs, maybe, is self-torture and negative self-talk. Your thoughts running and spinning through your mind is a waste of energy. How do I know? Because we all did it. Years and years in that loop, and it got us nowhere. So talking from experience, all of us have bad days. Days when all you want to do is hide under the duvet. The weight of your situation makes it hard to breathe, never mind do anything else. On these days, it's more important to be kind to yourself than anything else. That's where you can do one thing that you love. Have one person you can call, a friend, family member, someone from the support group or a therapist. Someone who will know will support you without judgment or criticism. Ideally, someone that can give you a hug, as touch is one of the best ways to calm down the nervous system. Having a support network that understands your situation and allows you the space where you can rant, cry or laugh. To release emotion and pain is the most appropriate way for you in that moment. Not someone who tries to fix it, criticizes you or judges you, but the space to be as open, honest and raw about your reality. Bad days, pain, trauma will all still happen, but how you deal with them will change. That's your power. That's your power. It's in your reaction to the situation, not the situation itself. Learn to respond and not react. It's very difficult at the beginning, but worth it in the end. So to end, please know that you're not alone. There are people here to support you, to listen, and that you deserve to be loved and supported. Contact Aoife Griffin at aoifegriffin.ie or info@alienated.ie for further information. By the way, don't forget to use some of the fantastic free resources on YouTube. Just search for the topic you want and choose something like meditation, mindfulness, nutrition, comedy, music, or even hypnosis. And take care. All the best.
There you go, Erin. I hadn't seen that before. I wish I'd seen it about 10 years ago.
Lovely, isn't it? It's really, really heartwarming.
It's great to see something that that gives you some practical guidelines on how to survive, you know, the trauma.
Yeah, because the main thing with people that I deal with is because they've lost their sense of self. If you're living with the alienator, and you know, because we talked about grooming, and you know that the person that you're still living with is making their business to destroy who you are with the children. And it's the horrifying games that the alienator head games they'll play, and the bribing, and it's horrifying. And sometimes when people are so beaten down emotionally, they need that building up of a sense of self again.
Well, we've a number of parents who have decided that any effort to try and see my children is just going to result in the other half going crazy. The child's going to be upset. Therefore, the child will see me as an upset in their lives. If I turn up at all for access, if I do anything, I'm just upsetting my own child. So I'm not going to. I'm going to move to a different county, move to a different country, and wait for the child to come back to me. Is that a sensible strategy, would you say?
I can understand why it has to happen sometimes.
Yeah.
But what the child needs to
the
know.
individual's mental health as well as the child's, of course.
Yeah, I know, but what you have to do at the end, I think, is as long as the child knows that you are never going to give up on them. So before you make yourself absent, you tell the child why you're making yourself absent.
Okay.
And you can tell the child, I will always send you birthday cards, birthday presents. I'll always keep in touch, even though you know that he or she will never give the child the presents.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still worth to do it that way. And yes, eventually, and this is the thing I've often said to the alienator, you will pay a terrible price for what you're doing. Because when the children get old enough to look at you and want to go back to their fathers, they will never forgive you for what you've done. And that's the truth.
But by then, their father, or presuming, just using your analogy there, may well be an alcoholic, penniless, homeless person somewhere who can't cope anymore, and therefore the child will stay with the in that case a mother, or vice versa.
I think this is all part of what you were showing. There has to be places and people who will support the alienated parent, mother or father, and look after them emotionally, not just physically, because exactly right. I mean, it is so easy to just see the majority of people ending up on homelessness on the streets are victims of alienation and usually domestic violence, and many more men than women. Because I'm afraid I know I get into trouble for saying this, but it's far more women use emotional alienating than men, because men tends to use finance as a weapon, and women use emotions, in my experience.
Well, there are generalizations, of course, and many exceptions, but that was also the finding of Richard Hogan, that it was predominantly men that were the victims of parental alienation in the spouse. I mean, obviously, again, the kids are the ultimate victims, but we've a whole stack of questions coming in here, Erin. I'm just going to very quickly touch on one or two. There's one I saw there. Oh yeah, Erin, would you advise telling or sharing with adult children the information on parental alienation?
Yes, I would. I mean, you owe it to your children to be absolutely honest about yourself and about the problems that were facing you and why this happened, why you made the choice you did. Because the children have to learn. They won't love you any the less. They'll love you more.
I suppose people would feel, alienated parents might feel that if they start telling a child at any age about parental alienation, it will be interpreted as an attack on their former spouse.
No, it doesn't have to be, because it doesn't have to be an attack.
But it's going to be hard to tell them about this thing that has happened to them without it somehow coming across as,
well, I'm not saying
something negative about daddy, or you're saying something negative about mommy.
No, by the time they get to 14, 15, they're capable of understanding. You don't have to do it with malice or anger. You have to say, this is the relationship that I had with your father or mother, and this is where it went wrong. And just be very honest and say, in many cases, some people would have to say, look, I walked away because I couldn't bear to see you suffering, trying to make peace between us, because it's not your job. That's honest.
That also presumes that the child is actually open to hearing it, but oftentimes with the parent,
may not hear it to begin with, but if you remain the same loving person you always were, and you don't denigrate your partner, that's an important point.
Indeed. And if you have a child who has been sensitized to the possibility of everything that comes out of your mouth being negative about them, let's say, I'm alienating my ex-wife, and I'm telling my kids now, girls, before you go over there, don't forget everything she says is going to be an attack on me. She's going to be very sly about it. She's going to pretend she's trying to help you and educate you and be nice to you, but really watch out, because she's going to be having a dig at me somewhere along the line. And the kids go over there then like little weapons, which is what they're being used as, charged up, looking for these things. So, you know, the mother, in to her credit, tries to explain to the child what's going on, and the kids say, aha, daddy told us you were going to say this kind of stuff about him.
But again, we're not talking kids, we're talking about teenage, mid-teens. So
15 years of age.
Okay, 15 years later, but it's better than never.
Well, indeed, later is still a good, yeah. So I there was another question here I wanted to this one is coming from a psychologist. I work as a specialist expert psychologist in these cases, and am now conducting forensic violence risk assessments on parents accused of some form of domestic violence, as it knocks false accusations into a crooked hat. That's a good thing to see, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And needed, much needed.
Yeah, well, there aren't enough people doing that kind of thing in our experience. And in our experience, the you know, one of the things we did recently, Erin, was to ask all of the levels of courts in Ireland, you know, what is your criteria for the qualifications required by someone to do a parental alienation assessment? And there isn't one.
No, I'm not surprised. No,
they're a psychologist or they're a therapist, but you know, this is a specialist area. Surely you
very specialist.
No, the judges know these people, and you know, that's really not good enough, is it?
No, it certainly isn't. I'm Irish, by the way, from my people from County Mayo.
I was going to say, well, Pizzey, of course, is a very Mayo type name. I don't.
No, I'm married. That's my ex-husband. So my married name was Carney.
Carney. Oh, okay. Well, that's.
I went and opened the Harcourt Terrace. It was the first refuge in Ireland.
Did you really?
Yeah, and there was a lovely male priest who also helped open it, and it was not gendered at that point. Men and women were being helped.
Wow.
And then unfortunately, it's very sad, because the reason why there's no men's refuges is because the government did give a huge grant to help men's refuges. And guess who they gave the grant to? Women's Aid, a known feminist ideology. So that's why there's no male refuges. They said they'd advise men.
But we have an organization here as well, I understand, called Men's Aid.
Yeah, but they got virtually no money. We've got Men's Aid. We've got Families Need Fathers, but they have to beg for a few pennies. Whereas in England, there's nearly 300 million a year goes to Refuge and the National Federation.
Wow.
And boys over the age of 12 can't go into refuges. Shocking.
It is a horrible situation, Erin. I applaud you for the work that you have done over the decades to help women, and to a lesser extent, because of inability, I suppose, men. In closing, we can't simply say that the solution to all of this is education, 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 any more than we can say, you know, the trick to buying the best house is location, location, location. There's a lot more to it than that. How are we going to start to educate people who simply do not think there's a problem and therefore do not want to know?
There's not much you could do, but to point out that it may very well become something they have to know, because one or other of their children or their family members get involved in a violent relationship, and then they'll know all about it. The majority of people, if you ask them, will have had some experience of violence in relationships. interestingly enough, there was a man coming this morning to sort out some blinds for me. And he was asking me what I write about, because he could see I wrote a lot of books. And I said domestic violence. And guess what? He once had a girlfriend who was violent.
Mm.
So we had an education conversation about it.
I mean, it's a bizarre thing that men don't really get taken seriously, but of course it does happen. You know, women do physically hit men, particularly men who are meek and not inclined to hit anybody.
Look at Johnny Depp. Amber Heard.
Well, indeed, it's of course that entire Johnny Depp case is marred with controversy, in as much as there are much social media is attending to the fact that, as far as they're concerned, he shouldn't be raising all of this for public attention, and that's bad for kids and to see, and he's a spiteful man and
anyway,
violent himself, and he was a drinker and all these kind of things. So
never ever violent. There's no history of violence. There is in hers. She spent the night in jail for attacking somebody. There's no history of Johnny Depp's violence.
I'm not familiar enough to comment on the case, but I do know one of the men that came to us said he had been physically assaulted by his ex-wife. She grabbed him from behind and brought him to his knees, and he had to get a couple of stitches. And his doctor insisted, because this was not the first time it happened, that he had to tell the police. And when he did, the response from the policeman was, "Well, you know, you're a fully grown man, and you're not able to take care of yourself."
Exactly. That really
if he had in any way tried to take care of himself,
he would have been,
he'd been in jail. So
I know. All I can say is, you know,
room for improvement.
As soon as you meet your person that you think is going to be your permanent partner, be very aware, both sides. And if you see those signs of morbid jealousy or violence, don't go on with the relationship, get out.
A wonderful way on which to conclude. Thank you very much, Erin. Can you just tell us, you said that your book is only available in reprint, or sorry, secondhand. Is it not available online?
No, it was only stayed in shops for 3 weeks. It was taken off the shelves.
By whom?
It's a long story, but all my books were remaindered, so you can only get them secondhand on Amazon. And I've written 20 books, many of them bestsellers.
Right, and they're what, banned?
You can't buy them. They were pulped.
They were pulped?
Pulped by the publishers, yeah.
Pulped. Why was that? Why was that?
It's a long story. There's no time to go into it, but it's basically because so many editors, in particularly 80s and 90s, they were all feminists. And I unfortunately had a particularly virulent feminist. She was a radical lesbian. She hated me. She said, "I hate you. I hate your books."
I mean, people's
sexuality
really doesn't come into right and wrong, does it? And
it does in this case, because
it's
about
not just in this case, Erin. In many cases regarding parental alienation, it does seem that.
Because the radical feminist movement have always said that there's no reason for a father to want. They don't believe the father ever wants to see his child or his children. They simply don't believe it. They just believe that he should not see the children under any circumstances, because the only thing he wants is to get back with his wife.
Mm.
And they're very powerful. And they're right through the judiciary. Men have an awful time in family courts.
And when you say radical feminists, what is a radical feminist? Pardon my ignorance.
Okay, an equity feminist which is all of us are, and men, meaning women have equal rights with men.
Mm.
Everybody. Now, a radical feminist doesn't believe that.
Oh.
Because a radical feminist believes that men are the enemy, that all women are innocent victims of male violence and abuse. So virtually saying anything, a boy, a child, a baby born is a potential rapist or batterer because he's male.
It's a bit of a stretch, isn't it?
No. Well, I mean, it's insane, actually.
I was trying to be euphemistic, Erin.
I don't have any euphemisms pretty.
It is bizarre, isn't it? We live in a strange world and strange times, but I suppose all we can do is our own little bit to leave the place a tiny bit better than it was when we arrived. And you've certainly done that with your work, and I hope it may continue for many, many years to come. Erin Pizzey, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed.
And that's it from Alienated Children First for today. Do check on the website. There will be a recording of the interview with Erin if you want to refer back to it at a later date. There are also a number of other resources that can help if you are experiencing parental alienation, and we also have other services there, suicide help with finding somebody to talk to and all that kind of thing, which Erin touched on during that wonderful chat. And thank you again to Erin Pizzey. On behalf of Alienated Children First, I'm Kenn Joyce. Till next time, very good night.